That's everyone. Thank you. So I want to welcome everyone to the third virtual workshop for the Mattapoisett Master Plan. My name is Lizette Gonzalez. I am joined by a number of colleagues from SERPED. I'm sure you'll see them throughout the night. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to jump into some just virtual meeting reminders. Now that this is our reality, we will be recording this meeting. I think you might have heard that just a few seconds ago, and we'll be posting it to the web page once completed. I want to let everyone know that closed captioning is available. So at the top left corner of your screen, you should see something that says Otter. If you click there, a new window should open and you'll get some live closed captioning of what's being said. For the purpose of our presentation, please remain muted, and you can turn your video off if you prefer. It just seems to keep our connections a little bit tighter during the course of the night. And if you have anything you want to say, you want to share, I encourage you to use the raise hand feature, or you can type your message in the chat feature as well. I don't think there's anyone joining us by phone, but just in case, you can press *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand and lower it. We'll be kind of checking our screens to see if anyone's got their hand up, or if there are any chats in the message box there. If for any reason there are any technical difficulties or some random disturbance, we'll shut the meeting down and you can rejoin within 5 minutes using the same link that you used to join the first time. So as I mentioned, we're here at the third workshop for the master plan, and I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their evening to join us tonight and have some of that face-to-face, which we so miss. But I also want to emphasize that this is one of the many ways that you can participate in the master plan. We have also provided a couple more flexible opportunities to gather your feedback and just share some information and get your take on it. So we've created an open space and recreation survey to get a sense for what your priorities are, as well as a transportation and circulation survey to get a sense for how you get around town and those challenges that you might face, as well as what potential solutions and kind of transportation futures you want to see. And lastly, and possibly I'd like to think of it as my favorite exercise because it has followed us from day one, is the mapping exercise. This, you'll see it during the course of the breakout sessions. We'll use it to kind of target and pinpoint places in town that you see problems or solutions or potential for projects and activities, but it's really something that you can use to look back at what was said at other workshops and interact with those comments. So for the purpose of our meeting tonight, we'll focus on the topics at hand, but feel free to use it for any of the topics that are touched upon in the master plan. And you can access all of these activities through the online workshop page linked right here. As I mentioned, this is the third workshop. We started the master plan in summer of 2020, and since then have had the opportunity to engage with our master plan committee and residents, and even had time to go to the Harbor Days event where we had a chance to talk with a couple people in person and get a sense for how things are going. As you can see, our timeline, we have a couple more events in the pipeline. The dates are to be determined, but we want to let you know that those are down the line. Today, specifically, we'll be talking about transportation and circulation, open space, and recreation. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Philip Hugh, who's going to talk about transportation in Mattapoisett.
Hi, everyone. My name is Philip. I'm one of the planners with SERPED. So this workshop has two components. The first is transportation circulation, and the other is open space. So I'm going to talk about transportation. So I'm going to first talk about some of the past planning efforts related to transportation, then talk about current conditions and kind of this big picture stuff, and then talk about how we might think of strategies to improve getting around in Mattapoisett moving forward. So in terms of past transportation planning efforts, there are three that we really look at. The first is a municipal bike and pedestrian plan that was created in 2015. It's technically not adopted, but it still offers a really great roadmap and framework for us to build upon. The second is the Route 6 study that runs kind of through multiple communities, including Mattapoisett, and talks about how that specific corridor can be improved in terms of safety and walkability, and among other things. The last one is a complete streets needs assessment and prioritization plan. This was completed in 2020. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but essentially this looked at all the streets in Mattapoisett and asked, okay, how can we prioritize pedestrian and bike improvements between all these streets and kind of come up with a plan moving forward. So in terms of the current transportation network, you probably know this a lot better than we do, but there are two major east-west routes. There's Interstate 195 and Route 6. Route 6 kind of runs through the heart of Mattapoisett as well. As you know, one of the big projects that's underway is the Mattapoisett Rail Trail, which, so the segment between Mattapoisett Neck Road and the Fairhaven border is complete, and work is ongoing between the that part portion to Mattapoisett Neck Road to Depot Street. And then kind of the other phases are between Marion and Orchard Street, I think, and kind of the connection that between kind of the two segments on either end. There is one bus line that runs from New Bedford to Wareham, and it has a scheduled stop kind of at Route 6 and North Street, but it is a flag system, so people can flag it down wherever. And there are 4 scheduled kind of trips throughout the day. So it's not a very regular bus. So most of Mattapoisett streets are kind of more rural in nature, have narrow shoulders and no sidewalks. Most of the sidewalks, as you can see in purple in the map, are concentrated in the village kind of center. So next. So what are complete streets? I mentioned this plan. So complete streets is really just a design approach to ask, hey, what if streets are designed in a way for everyone to use, people who walk, bike, take transit, and drive, not just cars. And maybe you're like me. I like to walk, I like biking, I take the bus and train, and I also drive to places. Like, you're not going to take a walk to Costco necessarily. So we all use different modes of getting around for different reasons, but we want to make it safe and comfortable for everyone, no matter what mode you're using. So last year, Mattapoisett completed a complete streets needs assessment and prioritization plan. So basically, all that means is they evaluated all the streets, looked at what kinds of pedestrian and bike improvements make the most sense. They evaluated through cost, feasibility, like is there enough width in the right of way, how complete it would make the network, and also safety. In the darker pink on this map are the priority projects that kind of have a higher priority. So they might be more feasible to do. They might really improve safety in some way. And as you get lighter, those are kind of lower priorities. But as you can see from this map, even if after all these projects are finished, there's still a lot of gaps in the network. So that's where this plan comes in today and really asks us, hey, what we want to ask you, how can we make this network even better for you? So scrolling down, here are just some kind of complete streets terms, because it can be a very jargony thing, transportation planning. So I'm not going to go through all these, but this presentation and all the interactive maps that's part of this presentation will be available online. Oh. So we wanted to kind of distill transportation planning and kind of all these strategies into a slightly easier way to understand, because there's definitely a lot that can be improved. So most of the time we're really using our streets and transportation network to get somewhere or do something. So even if you're walking around for fun, like walking on trails or biking around, that's a really important activity. That's using kind of the street network for recreation. So we've taken a lot of your early feedback from previous workshops. We've taken a lot of the recommendations from past planning work and try to bundle them up into different strategies under some common themes. And we call these the 3 futures or 3 portfolios. We're not super consistent So in theory, we could implement one future or some strategies from all of them, but we just wanted this easy way for all of us to understand how to think about each strategy and how it affects the big picture. So I'm going to go through these kind of three futures. So this first future says, I want a Route 6 that everyone can enjoy. So Route 6 is obviously a really important thoroughfare that goes through Mattapoisett. So we identified some kind of key strategies that would really improve that. So the first is traffic calming strategies in the kind of business district. And the second are more crossings. So in orange are potential locations for new crossings because it's pretty hard to cross Route 6 today. In yellow are the existing crossings. So next. So the second one imagines, okay, what if we prioritized our transportation improvements to connecting residents to all of the open space and natural kind of resources of Mattapoisett. So in this strategy, kind of in the purple one, instead of necessarily putting in full sidewalks, because that can be really expensive and difficult to implement, we can ask how can we make these kind of some of these lower volume roads a bit safer for other users that aren't just cars. And then the second one is just expanding trails and including more trailheads at some of these locations. And lastly, this asks, okay, what if we concentrate a lot of our pedestrian and bike improvements closer to the village center? So how can we get people to, instead of driving, walk or bike to go to the village center and visit the different businesses and other kind of community resources there. So the first is like focusing a lot of transportation improvements within the village center, as you can see in kind of the purple polygon in the center, and then improving all the sidewalks kind of in that teal color that kind of extend out from that village center. So again, I want to emphasize it's not about picking one of these and we're not doing anything else. Instead, these are just kind of big picture ways of thinking about how we can link transportation strategies to the goals that we want to do. So now I'm going to turn it over to Robert to talk about open space and recreation.
Thanks, Philip. Hey, I'm Robert Cabral. I'm also a planner here at SERPED. And I think we're going to talk about open space very similar to the way Philip just talked about transportation, keeping in mind, pulling certain things from these schemes and that they're big picture ways of thinking about it. Also similar to the transportation part of the master plan, the open space portion will draw from past planning to inform future decisions for Mattapoisett. Some of the existing plans we looked at were the priority protection areas, the open space and recreation plan, community preservation plan, and municipal vulnerability preparedness plan. Drawing from these plans and some local, state, and regional resources, we've mapped out data that highlights Mattapoisett's priorities for open space thus far. The first of these we're looking at here is priority development and preservation areas. In the town of Mattapoisett, along with Buzzards Bay Coalition and other local and regional partners, has set aside land for preservation. This includes the Mattapoisett River Protection District, the salt marshes at Pine Island, Mattapoisett Neck, and other resources. Priority development areas shown in purple include the Route 6 business corridor, also along Route 6, the mixed use area, business park, and industrial drive, as well as land near Tinkin Hill Road. In alignment with these goals, town of Mattapoisett has a significant portion of its land, roughly 1/3, listed as protected in perpetuity. Smaller areas of land, primarily south of I-195, shown there in pink, have limited or no protection, increasing their potential for development. In addition to this, the Mattapoisett Land Trust has acquired and continues to preserve and maintain many parcels of land throughout Mattapoisett. And the last of these maps we'll look at is the South Coast Bike Lane, which we'll talk about a little bit. Yeah, it connects, Philip mentioned some of this stuff too, but it connects to Mattapoisett from the west. With the area near Shining Tides is going to be completed soon. And it's primarily going to serve as an off-road separate use path with an on-road connection shown in red there at Mattapoisett's downtown. The portion to the east near Marion will be constructed soon. And the center portion will be constructed last, and it may require some acquisitions to complete. So while we work through these exercises, something to think about. Building off of these considerations, we created a survey for open space to help identify priorities for future Mattapoisett. This survey will ask participants a few questions about their priorities for how open space could and should be used. Depending on one's answers to the survey, a different thematic map will show as a result. And this will highlight locations in Mattapoisett that are particularly relevant for that set of answers given. Our hope with this is that it will help Mattapoisett to prioritize where and how to direct resources by seeing land that is impacted by a range of topics, such as natural resource protection or recreation. In addition to this, we also want to look at synergies that highlight land that is important across these topic areas. Just a note for methodology that we're looking at here, to generate the scores for each area on each of the maps we're going to show, we use various layers of data similar to the ones we just looked at above. The presence of one or more layers on a piece of land, it generates a score for that location. The more layers present, the higher the score for that location on that particular map. So here we can see some dark green in the red circled areas. Priority themes for these maps include score for climate resilience, natural resources, recreation, and some hybrid focuses. We can go through these maps here and see the first one is the climate resilience focus. And similar to the example, the darker green are areas of emphasis for this focus. So the primary data layers were the 500-year floodplain, 5-foot sea level rise projections, Nature Conservancy resilient lands, and then we have some other layers that we considered as well below. For the next one, we have natural resources focus. The primary data layers for this were aquifers and wellhead protection areas, habitats, and prime farmland. And the last one here is recreation focus. So for this, our primary data layers were areas within walkable distance of recreation and conservation areas, as well as areas within walkable distance of community assets. For example, schools. And we can just scroll through these quickly to save time, but we have the hybrid schemes that followed a similar approach. So we have the climate resilience and natural resources focus, climate resilience and recreation focus, and the natural resources and recreation focus. I'm going to hand it back to Lizeth now, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the format for the rest of the meeting tonight.
Thank you. So that's a lot of information to take in, also a lot to think about. We're hoping that the formats that we presented, these futures and scenarios, is one way to think about what we want in Mattapoisett in 5-10 years down the line. So from there, I want to open it up to a bit of a discussion. We'll break out into two separate groups. One will talk about transportation, one will talk about open space and recreation, and then after about 15-20 minutes, we'll switch and kind of have a conversation about the other one. And then we'll come back and just kind of regroup and share some big picture takeaways. I want to remind everyone that we will have the presentation shared on the website as well. So if you want to access some of these exercises, you can click the buttons right here and they'll take you right to them. So without further ado, Julianne, would you do the honors of splitting us all up for a little bit?
Oh, sorry about that. So we're going to talk about transportation. Then I will switch out with the other facilitator, Robert, who's going to kind of handle the open space. So we have 15 minutes to really focus on all your ideas for transportation. So before we get started, I know it's always awkward, but I would love for everyone to just briefly introduce themselves, kind of if you're a resident or kind of how you're associated with Mattapoisett and kind of any other information that you think would be great. So again, my name is Philip. I'm one of the planners with Serped. Gregory, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Gregory Gurr, and I'm a transportation planner with Serped.
So I'm going to just call people so we don't have to kind of awkwardly choose who does it. So Ev, I don't know which one of you is Bev. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Oh, you're muted.
I'm not muted.
How's that? Is that
That's
better?
great. Yes.
Okay, I'm Bev Picelli,
And I'm Liz DiCarlo.
and we live down in the in the
Cedars.
Cedars at the end of Prospect Road, in the flood zone, blah, 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 you know. So we're particularly interested in that map you showed. But we also are very interested in the recreation as well as transportation. You know, this is a town that's growing older by the day. And we really, you know, there is a need for good sidewalks and an easy way to get from place to place, particularly crossing Route 6.
Awesome. Mary, do you want to go and introduce yourself?
Unmute, sure. Excuse me, I'm Mary Darmiti. I'm a member of the Master Plan Committee, but I joined, having lived here in Mattapoisett for about 5 years. And this is the topic that is nearest and dearest to my heart, transportation/circulation, and most specifically, how to calm Route 6 so that it doesn't be such a divider down the middle of Mattapoisett. We've got great attractions on and facilities on both sides, but we've got residents on both sides and a speed limit of 50 miles an hour in a good portion of the town and still 35 miles an hour right through the heart of the business district. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm thrilled to see more pedestrian crossings, but I think we need to do whatever we can to do calming. And I'm not sure how to do it exactly, but my goal is to figure out how to get the speed limit reduced.
Awesome. Michael, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Garnier. I worked as the town administrator from 2009 to March of 2020 for the town of Mattapoisett. And since then, I've been trying to help out with the planning board and assisting with them with their business and joining the groups since February, actually, and try to input some information that I may have knowledge of on some of the issues that the group's been discussing.
Perfect. Melanie. Oh, you're trying to find the unmute button. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there it worked. I was hitting it. Nothing was happening. I'm Melanie Wilson. I live on Beacon Street, in downtown, and I'm interested in all of this in terms of planning. I see, I use an electric scooter, and so I'm very put off by Route 6 in particular, because there's no way to get across except downtown. I'm also interested in, the planning for the road out front, Main Street, Water Street, Beacon, and Marion Road. I'm mostly here just to listen.
Well, your feedback, anyone's feedback is definitely very valid. So, listen, but maybe you can always send kind of your comments to the chat or kind of in the survey later. So Crystal, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm part of the Master Planning Committee. I'm currently out of state in California, so have a different backdrop. You might say that tree doesn't look like an Eastern tree. I grew up in town on Acushnet Road near River Road. And after college, I moved away. I was gone for 20 years, and now I'm back with my 2 kids and husband, who are 11 and 13. I bicycle with my daughter to school, and I also work part-time for Mass Bike.
Awesome. Janice.
Janice Robbins. I'm a member of the planning board and also on the master plan committee. Been in town, a resident since the late 70s, and our 2 kids grew up here. I'm very interested in all of the topics that are covered under the master plan. I think in our committee meetings, we've spent a lot of time on transportation, knowing how critical the issues are and what possible solutions might be out there, especially as it relates to Route 6. I think that seems to be a common denominator among everybody, that Route 6 is something that needs attention. But I'm also interested in hearing other ideas as part of the Master Plan Committee. It's nice to get different perspectives from different folks who come from different areas. And then from the planning board, it's sort of a overriding matter in terms of what we do as a board. And I look forward to see where we go with these discussions tonight.
Thanks. Shirley? Oh, Shirley, sorry, you were unmuted, but I think you muted yourself.
Oh, okay.
You're all set now.
Thank you. Thanks for the help. I'm Shirley Haley. I am on the board at the Council on Aging, and I'm on the planning committee as well. And I am concerned about transportation, about some sort of bus that we could get to go from here to Fairhaven or even New Bedford. Years ago, the regular sort of buses from New Bedford used to come through town, but they stopped that. It probably wasn't commercially viable. But the only other option is the bus that's already been mentioned that goes up and down Route 6, and you have to flag it down. And for a senior trying to get to a medical appointment somewhere, that's not an optimal solution. The COA does have a bus that can give people rides and does give many people rides. But it would be nice if we had something you could do independently without having to make a reservation with the COA. I don't know what kind of hope we have of getting some kind of circulating transportation through here, but that's my wish list.
Great. And then I think Cindy is the last.
Cindy Terse, and I live just off Matt Neck Road on Timberledge Lane, next to the bike path. So in addition to the circulation problems that have already been mentioned on Route 6, I would like to see something done with Matt Neck Road. The speed limit is inconsistent coming down the road. Daily, I watch people come to the end of the bike path, sometimes with a child in the lead, and come out onto the road. And once the bike path is complete, then we have even more of a safety issue. It's just, we're 40 miles an hour at the bike path. So that's a huge concern. Yeah. I moved here from Hawaii almost 4 years ago. So my experience is in a lot of other places, and I hope I can share some of that with you as things go along. Thank you.
Awesome. Did everyone get a chance to introduce themselves? All right, perfect. I just wanted to make sure the kind of Brady boxes kind of moved around, and I wasn't entirely sure. So thanks so much for introducing yourselves. Gregory, do you mind sharing your screen with the map? All right, so we have this really great wiki map, which is basically means like we can add comments and points to everywhere. So the first kind of question I want to ask is kind of based on kind of our presentation. We had those kind of three big ideas: Route 6, access to trails and open spaces and improvements to those, and kind of like a lot of the branching roads throughout Mattapoisett, and then also the focus on making the village more walkable, and also the streets that extend out of the village also a lot more walkable and bikeable. So I guess I'll definitely just open it up to any ideas people have on transportation improvements. So the dots already there are from previous workshops and previous comments. So I guess a lot of you mentioned Route 6. So does anyone want to say something more that we haven't heard about yet?
This is Mary. I'll make a very specific comment. Right at County Road and North Street, just to the right of that, to the right of the little park, which is Dunseith Park, the speed limit doesn't change to a lower speed limit, and I'm not remembering the exact, Dunseith Gardens. Just to the right of that is 7-Eleven and Dunkin' Donuts, and the speed limit is still 50 miles an hour there. I can't tell you how many mornings I've come out and come by, and kudos to Dunkin', nobody minds waiting in the drive-through line, but the drive-through line is sticking out into the road. And I don't think that's a problem, except the fact that the speed limit is 50 miles an hour and you don't have a good clear view as you're coming around that bend. I mean, it's just waiting for a massive multi-car accident to happen. So to distill that down, I would say, you know, it makes no sense to have the major convenience store in town in a 50-mile-per-hour zone with a drive-through that extends into the 50-mile-per-hour zone. And it's a huge, long drive-through. I mean, I don't fault them for not making it big enough. I think the problem is Route 6.
Mary, where exactly along this stretch is it located?
It's right, but it's between Dunseith Gardens and those white, the white, or maybe, no, that's it right there. That's it. See, the drive-through is the giant U, the giant U right there.
Yeah.
No, to the left, to the left, to the left, right
Yeah.
there. That's it. And the right-hand piece of it is where they stick out into the street, the right-hand intersection there of that U. 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' is the issue because it's a drive-through and that's where everybody goes. And
the speed limit is just symptomatic of the whole problem with Route 6.
yeah,
When we had one of our meetings, I think that the whole concept of what Route 6 should look like needs to be re-examined.
exactly.
And we understand that the state might even be willing to give up jurisdiction over Route 6. And maybe we should reimagine what that, particularly between the traffic lights and a little beyond where Mary was talking about, in terms of what it even should look like. Reducing the speed limit is just one aspect of it, but the road is set up so people drive faster.
Well, it was set up originally as a 4-lane highway to get to Cape Cod, and that time is coming on.
Yeah, so the whole idea is, and I understand there are even grants available that the town might be able to take advantage of to just completely redesign some portion of the section of Route 6 and make it more part of a town rather than a pass-through road. And we were told that Marion is looking at the same concept of totally reimagining what the road should look like. So that actually really got my attention when we've been talking about transportation previously, that should be an important focus. That would really help connect the two sides of the town and make the village connected to the rest of the areas of the town that's north of Route 6. It would have pedestrian and bike crossings would be a lot safer and a lot easier to do.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Janice. I mean, we can put in more crossings, but frankly, if the speed limit is 50 miles an hour, I'm scared stiff whether there's an official crossing or not.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really interesting option for the town to take over jurisdiction from the state. It sounds like it could be rather complicated, but I would say that would be a plan A that we should focus on. And if not, plan B would be getting to the state to reduce the speed limit so that it is viable for the town.
Very, very quickly, Mary, firstly, thank you for all that feedback. But second of all, can you read the text that I typed up? Sure. Is that a good paraphrasing of your point that you'd like to make?
I think you have to put specifically that high number of patrons in the drive-through extending out onto Route 6 doesn't mix well with the 50-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Got it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I mean, there's people, there's, mothers, parents with kids who are on their way out for the morning that can't, I do the walking because I got all the time in the world, but they can't go to the walking because it's a schlep to get everybody out of the car and go in and so forth and so on. They should be able to go to the drive-through when there's multiple people in the car and such. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. And the speed limit does change, but it changes right in the middle of Dunseith Gardens. It goes down, I think, I want to say to 40 or 35. I can't remember now. I took pictures, but I don't have access to them right now. So Janice, if you say, if we can get jurisdiction, then we can do what makes sense. If that's not feasible, then perhaps.
I think it's somebody needs to look at it and study it and figure out, the state would, it's obsolete in terms of being a state highway because they don't need it. 195 is the pass-through highway. And
exactly.
The disadvantage to the town is they take over the financial responsibility for the road as well. But in the scheme of things, if we want to really redesign, I sort of think let's make it into a boulevard or something of that sort.
You could do it down to 2 lanes and put in like a diagonal parking or something that would slow everybody down.
Right.
There's all kinds of options. We don't need to figure out the specifics. But
somebody who's got the skill in design is needed to look at it and come up with a proposal. And somebody at the town level obviously would need to pursue it with the state to determine what it would take to acquire jurisdiction and what grants are out there to help the town fund a project of this type. But speed limit is an issue no matter, just like Cindy mentioned on Neck Road where I live,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Whenever you have a straight, wide road, people do not obey the limits.
So
I think that the lower the limit is, the less the less the speed of driving is, perhaps. People sort of think, oh well, I'll go 10 miles over the limit or whatever, but they won't. I think it helps to lower the speed limit.
It would be a help.
People are still going to exceed it, but let's have them exceed a lower number.
So one problem with kind of a lot of across kind of Massachusetts and American cities, I originally grew up in Houston, so driving is everything everyone does, but it's essentially, you can put any number you want on a road, but people drive kind of subconsciously and they will drive kind of we call like the designed speed limit, because certain roads, if they're super wide, you feel like you could just go down, there's no interruptions. But there are ways to make roads kind of feel like you can't necessarily drive really, really fast down them and still be safe. So along with kind of posted side limits, I guess the question is what strategies can we do to kind of put them under an umbrella of traffic calming to get people to drive kind of slower naturally. So my question is, besides Route 6, what are some other streets kind of in Mattapoisett that you think have the biggest discrepancy between how fast people go and how fast they should go, given kind of what's around?
So before we leave Route 6, can I just interject a little bit here?
Yes.
Tom Tucker, the chairman of the planning board, about 5 months ago, attended a meeting at Serped, and Serped briefed on various grants that were available under the one-stop grant program. And one of them was the issue of looking at your business districts, or what they call a downtown grant. We worked with Grant and Jeff Walker, and we put a proposal together, and we're waiting to receive word on a $75,000 grant to specifically look at all of the issues that have been raised relative to Route 6 and the issue of additional development of some rather large lots along Route 6 in that commercial district, and how we can do it right in site plan review and some of the traffic calming issues. So I think we felt that this was an area that we've heard for many, many years of the problems, and this was a good opportunity to apply for a grant. So we should be here, and I was just thinking, I believe those grants are announced in early October. So we're definitely looking at drilling down here, but the chairman of the planning board definitely came back with, if you can do it and you can apply for it, and we did. The town administrator, myself, Grant King, and Jeff Walker worked on that, and we got it in, and I think we have a good chance of getting it.
Hi, could we say something? Hello?
Hey there, Bev.
Okay. Hi. We live in a community down at the end of Prospect Road, near Angelica and Crescent Beach, and the town has I don't know what the increase is of people who live here in the summer only, but the traffic coming down Prospect Road off of Route 6 and going down Angelica Avenue is dangerous sometimes. People, they're both straightaways, and people just fly down the road without any, without any concern about what else is going on. So how you regulate something like that, where maybe a speed limit should be lower in the summer months than in the rest of the year. But there's been lots of near accidents and kids on bikes and dogs running out and different kinds of things like that. That's just tragedy waiting to happen.
Actually, I have another concern I would like to bring up, and that is that in the most recent Wanda article reporting the capital planning committee meeting, Mike Lorenko, our town administrator, said the town doesn't own the railroad easement or the right of way, which would be one way that we could connect sort of south of Route 6 to north of Route 6 if we could get that issue clarified so that the bike path could continue across Route 6 once it comes to Depot Street, and then be able to connect to the new portion that was just done at the Marion Town Line to the end of Industrial Park Drive. So that's another consideration of an off area that needs to be looked at, because if this issue of the railroad easement for the bike path in the future is going to depend on basically figuring out a value prior to taking any person's land, it's going to take a very long time to get that straightened out. So my concern is to get from the north part of Route 6 to the south part of Route 6 and continue into Fairhaven on the bike path, or for young people to be able to get to school at ORR or even sent to school. People need to have access to the roads that would connect, again, from Depot Street, crossing Route 6 on Main Street, and then finding a way to be able to get up to the Industrial Park Drive and get behind ORR and go to school, or even come into work.
Yes, definitely. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I think all of you know kind of what that was talking about. So essentially, I think this is like the main problem. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Maybe.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So essentially, if this right of way around this middle section isn't figured out, there will have to be an on-road kind of alternative to complete from this area, which will kind of is the next phase, and then what's under construction, which is like this part.
So there needs to be some real in-depth look at how to do that in a safe way for people, either walking or on bicycles.
Thank you for that feedback.
Sure.
It may already be noted on the map, but I think that North Street towards Rochester is also an issue with some speed concerns. I've also bicycled along that road, and it was a concern with kids because it's just 2 lanes. There's no sidewalk or anything. So if there's no note of North Street to Rochester, and I also just noticed that there's nothing really in the Tinkham area that's noted. Acushnet Road does travel all the way to Tinkham. I think it is a popular bicycling route.
Let me share my screen.
Hey, everybody.
I think we're all in the room, yeah. So just to set it all up, we're going to be talking about open space and recreation. I'm going to let Robert lead, since he was the kind of lead discussion person for the presentation, kind of knows these maps back and forth.
Cool, thanks, Lizette. So yeah, we're going to do a quick run through of the open space exercise that we talked about. Like Lizette said, we gave a lot of information. Walking through it really briefly might be helpful. This exercise basically involves 2 questions. Include identifying a future vision for Mattapoisett's open space, as well as a few more questions to provide your feedback on the survey itself. And we can discuss, specific areas in the map or just thoughts you have about open space in general. So we're going to read off, the questions, and we can just all take it together. Feel free to just kind of shout out an answer to the questions when you see it. Thanks. So the first question here says, when you picture open spaces for future generations, what do you imagine most? Coastlines, wetlands, and beaches that protect us from sea level rise and storms, natural spaces that support wildlife and human communities, and the third option is parks, trails, and playgrounds filled with healthy kids. So it's just an exercise, but does anyone want to just kind of throw out an answer for the first one?
All of the above.
If only. So just to give you an idea of why we're doing this, these questions are meant to generate those types of maps. So based on like your top priority, you'll maybe get like a map that's all climate resilience. Or if you have a response that kind of balances climate resilience with recreation, it'll show you where those like high priority areas in town are. So it's not necessarily a science, but it's a great way to kind of see what people's preferences are when we ask what your like top priority is. Does anyone have one in particular? If not, we can kind of just run through it and see what the result is and maybe use that as a stepping stone for some conversation.
I would say natural spaces that support wildlife and human communities, because honestly, that to me includes the parks and trails and playgrounds, because that's what a human community is.
For sure.
And the natural space to me also would include the wetlands and that wildlife. So that's my way of thinking around that one.
Okay, no, that's actually really great to know, because the way we talk about things is really important as to how people understand it and really what happens on the ground, right? So that's really helpful. And for that second question, how would you prioritize Mattapoisett's efforts to acquire more open space? Are we talking about places to contribute to the protection of the village, harbor, waterfront homes, places for residents to play and exercise, or places to protect animals and natural systems, if you have to think of one?
I would go with the first.
Okay. So based on those 2 questions, which is just, like I said, you can take the survey a couple times. There's no like limit. You should be able to go back and see how it changes based on your answers. So based on our responses, we got climate resilience and natural resources. So Robert, if you want to explain a little bit more, please do so.
Sure. Yeah. So we can see, when we ran through the primary data layers, we've got a hybrid of those 2 if we look back at them. And some of the dark green areas reflect this. And just for the logistics of going through the survey to make sure it's super understandable for everyone, if you scroll down, you get a question 3 here where we can add anything, our thoughts, what do we think about what we saw on this map? Does the areas in dark green align with our expectations for climate resilience? Are there things that we feel differently about? And then if we hit the next, Lizette, you touched on this point, the next set of questions helps us to look at the other maps, like you said. So we could just click a few of these. These 6 are all of the maps that are possible to see, depending on your answers. So if you took every permutation of this survey, these are the 6 you can get. So we can click a couple of them, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, thank you. And we'll hit next. And we can just give similar feedback to these other maps here. So we don't necessarily have to get that set of answers. We want to provide an opportunity to answer every one of these maps. And if we scroll down to question, how many we pick? I think we might be 7 on this one. There's also an answer or a question where we can provide an answer just for our general thoughts on open space, because it's very likely that there's a lot of really specific things that you all know about open space in Mattapoisett that's not captured in these maps. And we're very sensitive to that. And we want to, just use these as a discussion point tonight and when we take the survey in general to really get a lot of that very local knowledge that you guys all have. So just with that in mind, we can use these maps for the wiki map that we can show as a way to gather feedback. But we wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on Mattapoisett open space, the information we presented, and the survey. So we just welcome your thoughts in general on open space in Mattapoisett. And so, we open it up to hear from you guys. And I just want to say thanks for listening to us and offering this feedback and taking the survey with us.
I guess building on some of what Robert said, is there anything that comes to mind, like places that you currently love in Mattapoisett when it comes to open space, visiting open space, or maybe simply just taking it in, knowing it's there? Mattapoisett is a beautiful town, and part of that is open space, I believe, if you guys would agree with me.
I think you're right. I had a question about maybe more in general. I think you mentioned a percentage of which land is basically open space or preserved. It seemed pretty high for most towns. Is Mattapoisett a higher percentage of open space or reserved space, non-developmental space than most towns have, or are we about average?
Lizette, you may be able to answer this a little better than I can, but I think it's pretty high. A third is pretty good. And a lot of that revolves around the area to the northwest for the river protection.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my understanding as deals with drinking water for Mattapoisett as well as other towns in the area. So it's a very important system for that reason. And it also, there's a lot of coastline and wetlands in Mattapoisett, which are really valuable natural resources. So I think because of the activity and dedication of Mattapoisett, there's a lot of great natural resources here. You might see this a little higher than other towns.
Would you say that's something you support, Paul?
Yeah, I do support it. I mean, I think of it this way: the land trust is moving forward, and I guess the other part is there a point where too much becomes harmful? I don't foresee that, but in developing the town and all the basic things, is there a percentage of land from past experiences that become open or protected space that becomes more of a negative to a town than a positive?
I think that's a great comment, and definitely something to consider. I know it's not tied to a location, but I know we kind of identified the northwest portion there. I'm going to type that in there because I think it's worth mentioning, and I think other people who may not be here at the workshop or who may even be at the other breakout room might have something to say about this comment. Do you mind if I write that one down?
Sure.
Great.
And yeah, well, Lizette, while you write that down, I think one way we can think about that is, are there areas of town that are good candidates for growth and development, as well as areas that should have increased protection? So there are two sides to that coin. And we saw that a little bit on the first map, where identifying a lot of areas, Route 6 for future growth and development is something that was highlighted in the previous plans from Mattapoisett.
Yeah, I mean, my experiences are a little bit different, but I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. Yale University is a great asset to the city of New Haven. It's also a problem because it doesn't pay taxes. And the more they grow, and they have grown and bought more land, and more alumni are dedicating to it, the less tax base there is. And the more people are leaving the city of New Haven because taxes are too high. So I know that's a stretch from where we are here today. There are some points where I think there's a negative impact, unless we really have a plan of what we want to save and why it's important.
Okay, there we go. Bit of a technical difficulty there.
I think honestly, for me, my perspective on open space and recreation is that we as a planning committee had forward future thinking to say, yes, we did everything in our power to preserve open space and this and that for the children, because they're already going to be left this catastrophic scenario, sea rise, this and that. So I think if we could say, yes, we did, we tried to, know that the sea was going to rise. So we put the playground, in the northern part of town, or you know what I'm saying? Just like being able to think exactly what the master plan is to do, because when I read the last one, we're still talking about the same stuff. And I feel like all these meetings we keep having, like, I feel like we went over and shared this. So now let's like act like, yeah, I like your map. But so that's my take on open space. I don't have the scientific knowledge or experience to know the amount of land but.
And I would say, I think that's really fair. I think a lot of the times that's the balance that we have to strike with a master plan, right? You want to plan based on what knowledge we have and gather feedback and be able to make it so that way it's actionable, and that in the future it really produces change, right, on the ground. So, I mean, I heard you say that, building a playground or something that for the kids, right? Is that something that you would actually like to see? Because those suggestions are the concrete like tidbits that we're really looking for to really color this master plan.
I believe we went over that in great measure in the last meetings when we had the previous workshop about, not workshop, but meeting. Mm-hmm. We talked about, a park and everyone sort of shared what their vision was. So that, I'm sure it's on record. I'm not the one who brought it up. What's the YMCA space now? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Someone had mentioned turning that into a playground. That would be parking. We had those conversations. I don't know if anyone recalls that.
So, I actually don't see a point there. So can I put that down?
Well, I think this.
Well, that's not the YMCA. It's
This is the Holy Ghost Club off of Park Street.
Oh, yeah. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Which the discussion, as I recall, had been around the fact that the bike path would be going by there. The town has the acreage. Yeah. Potentially doing a community and senior center and playground and play fields and whatnot.
Yes.
This would be a bit further to the north.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, probably right where the gear is, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Following up on Yasmin's point, if we have a 5-foot tidal rising, how much space do we lose? I mean, has that been mapped out? I mean, I'm sure it has. I was just curious, does that take away a lot of the open space that we've preserved? And, to her point, maybe we've got to think about either replacing that in the future and or how to move assets to it.
Zeth, if I may?
Yeah, for sure.
Yasmin, I just wanted to get back to something you said, that yes, we did a master plan 20 years ago. It's absolutely no good if the other boards don't read it and pay attention to what is written by the townspeople. Because a developer comes in and they're like, oh yeah, you can build there, you can build there. And it's an absolute 180 degrees out from what we've talked about with climate resilience. So Yasmin, you're absolutely correct. Nothing that was completed in that master plan 20 years ago has been, brought to fruition.
I know, but I feel like, wait, what's Michael? Is that your name? He brought in the good points in our last meeting, how certain board members were going to be present and, where we're bringing some accountability to the table. So I have hope that we're going to be transparent in all this and these open space and recreation. Ultimately, I feel like that's all we're going to have left at this point. And we have to do everything in our power. So whatever that means, we do it.
Yeah, and I think with this new master plan, we set benchmarks, and I think it's been discussed on setting up an annual or whatever biannual meeting to discuss how the town is moving forward towards adopting what's in the document.
You're correct, Nathan. We did discuss that. Mike Gagne brought that up too, that we have to make sure that the other boards read this yearly.
One thing I did notice, and I'm not sure if this is the right avenue for it, but in my open space travels to various other communities, I noticed that none of them had garbage collection anymore because it's a cost to the town. And I thought, wow, and here we are at that point. We have like 10 barrels lined up. I'm not sure where that fits in open space recreation, and I don't even know, is that like, I know it's public space, but that's not to residents.
I mean, I think it's really important whether or not it falls under open space or recreation or services and facilities. It's still something that the town maintains, and it's really part of Mattapoisett's, fabric and culture, right, of these open spaces and keeping them beautiful. That's part of it, right? So could you tell me where that was again that you said you thought could benefit from some trash cans?
I'm saying it could benefit from not having trash cans.
Oh,
but then
not having them.
But then I worry about the, cost of unintelligent people and then the garbage going into the ocean. So I have hesitance, but at Ned's point, we have 10 garbage cans lined up.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't know if we pay a fee for disposal. I'm sure someone has to do that job. So I just thought, wow, we have we're so lucky. We have a town that people can come to Ned's point, clean their car out and dispose of it. We're like or their picnics, which is great. It's nice. But I also think there are tons of open space areas throughout, places you pack it in, you pack it out mentality. And I think we need to start being mindful and moving towards these more systematic ways to be efficient and limit cost. And if we are not paying for someone to empty the trash at that point, well, maybe we're paying for them to shovel the sidewalks at Old Hammond Town School. Like I don't know.
Prioritize is what you're thinking. Yeah. Okay.
Wanted to mention while I was at this typing that in, we've got about 5 minutes left. But we really want to get your feedback on all these points. We really encourage you guys to speak up, and thank you for offering these suggestions to us.
There we go. Yeah, I think this has been a great starting point for the conversation. Obviously, like we've said, it doesn't end here. You can always come back to the map if you want to share something more general. If you want to share those specific things, which Yasmin, you've been bringing up, and I think those have been really valuable pieces of information because we speak in kind of like big, general, lofty terms, right? In the sense of like, we want to maintain, Mattapoisett's open space or increase activities, but like, what are those activities? What types of recreation activities are you guys looking for? And that's really helpful in guiding what direction the town goes in, Okay. Does anyone have any other last comments that they want to share before Philip comes into our room and talks to us about transportation?
I think it's important to reach out to the community and different groups, just so people are aware of what open space exists in Mattapoisett. And I think some of the different communities could actually help as far as maintenance and awareness. For instance, like the Garden Club or Boy Scouts, or different organizations. And we have the Land Trust and other environmental organizations, but I think that would help with building the community and continue awareness of the beautiful things that we have in Mattapoisett. And I know when we were talking about the Holy Ghost grounds, it was mentioned about a senior center there, possibly. I'm not sure if that would be a final place, but I think it's really important as our population ages to have more accessibility for seniors and for everybody. And I think open space is fantastic for that. I think a senior center would be great too.
Do you think the Holy Ghost site could be best used for a senior center, for example?
I think it could be some kind of a community center, including potentially a senior center. I mean, it's not, I think it would be great to have something that's centrally located and accessible.
Yeah.
But that is on the future phase of the bike path.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's a real plus. So I think, you know, there's a lot of wonderful assets in Mattapoisett that can be better utilized or, you know, people made aware, but not, obviously not, so it's excessive and things get deteriorated.
Mm-hmm. And back to your point of the community center, I think it's becoming more and more popular to have and create these centers that not only serve seniors but serve as like community meeting spaces, and they're more for like everyone, you know, multi-generational spaces, right?
Right. And I think as a society, I mean, over my lifetime, we've leaned toward, you know, everything digital, and people are more sedentary, and open space provides us an opportunity to improve our health and get back to nature. So the more that we can really promote that, the healthier a society we are.
Yeah, I love that phrase, actually. I may take that at some point.
Be my guest.
Thank you.
I agree with everything you said, Pam. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Robert. I think we're going to switch in a few seconds. So before you go, just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you all so much. You know, the feedback has been so helpful, and we really appreciate it.
I think we're all set. So thank you so much for your patience. So you came from the open space conversation. Now we're going to talk about transportation, but you know, it was a little bit abrupt. So I want to make sure that you guys didn't have any final thoughts that you wanted to get down around open space. So we can definitely just make a note of that, and then we can start talking about transportation. Does that sound all right? Does anyone have any kind of one last thoughts they wanted to make about open space before we transition topics? Okay, great. So as I mentioned in the presentation, my name is Philip. I'm one of the planners with SERPED. So this breakout group is going to talk about transportation. So we just had kind of two really big overall questions, but this is definitely an open forum, and we just want to hear your kind of priorities, your ideas, your concerns, your questions, all around transportation and getting around Mattapoisett. So Greggy, do you want to put up the wiki map?
Absolutely. Can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Great. So we're just going to kind of make a note of kind of spatially on this map if you have like a specific comment about a certain area. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of make a note of it if it's a general comment. So our first question is, you know, we presented three kind of big ideas of how strategies are kind of grouped. There's kind of a focus on making Route 6 a lot safer. There's also another focus around improving access to all the open spaces and recreation opportunities in Mattapoisett. So a lot of the kind of branching out streets in Mattapoisett. And then the last focus we presented was around making the streets in Mattapoisett Village safer, and also the connections kind of that come out of it within about like a half-mile radius, so, or a mile radius. So does anyone have any kind of thoughts or questions around those focuses that we presented, or just any ideas they want to talk about? I guess we can start with Route 6, which is was a popular topic in the other group. Does anyone have any thoughts or concerns or ideas for how to improve Route 6?
Well, we looked at that corridor study that was done earlier, and there were different proposals made, different renderings. And the conversation we had before, there was just that hesitancy of narrowing that road, taking out any lanes. So I'm not sure, you're showing a lot of bicycling along there. Once again, I do a lot of bicycling, and I try to avoid Route 6. The sight distance is terrible when the cars come at quite a speed. Even just crossing Route 6, I think we might even be helped if there were some safer places to cross for bicyclists, like near Mattapoisett Neck Road, which will take you down to the bike trail, existing bike trail.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be a very
difficult place to cross Route 6. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I think there's a little bit of a echo, but I was just going to say definitely crossing Route 6 is really difficult. I originally grew up in Houston, so I'm definitely very familiar with a very auto-oriented world. And it's always frustrating that you need to like walk, I don't know, like 200 feet in one way to go find a safe crosswalk and then kind of go back, even though the place you wanted to go is directly across the street.
Yeah, and I mean, 200 feet is one thing, but I mean, over in the area of like Mattapoisett Neck Road, even forgetting about Mattapoisett Neck Road, but the only crossing is at Shaw Street before you get back towards the center of town. I mean, that's a half mile to go to
definitely.
a crossing, and another half mile back if you just need to cross. I mean, even, Mattapoisett Neck Road and Brant Island Road are two roads that lead to quite a few neighborhoods that have no access except for via the bike path. But you are almost isolated from crossing to the north side of town.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really, really good point. And kind of one in the Route 6 futures we presented, I think kind of some ideas that we heard from past workshops and also a previous plan was it would be great if there were crossings there. Any other thoughts or ideas around Route 6?
Yeah, I would echo that. I bike a lot, and a lot of when I think about my route, it's how do I stay off Route 6? So right now you can't get from the village to the bike path without going on Route 6 because there's a section of the bike path that hasn't been completed yet. And it's most people just bike on the sidewalk, and you're not supposed to bike on sidewalks. So it's definitely an issue if we could somehow improve it and make Route 6 safer for biking.
Tim, is there one location in particular that I would be able to zoom into on the map to leave your point?
All of Route 6 is hazardous for your bike. Again, I
know you mentioned near the village in particular, though. Are there any like particular crossings that are really hairy over there, or?
Yeah, for me, it's not so much crossing Route 6, but to ride along Route 6, because a lot of times to get to the north, you've got a route. There's Route 6 is the main east-west corridor, and you've got to get to any of the roads from the village. You got to get on Route 6, and it's pretty hazardous.
I think there's a consistent theme that we've had throughout all the sessions. That Route 6 is a little bit too fast, and doesn't have enough ways to even use it properly economically. I don't know that we have the ability to slow that traffic down or to break up in lights or stop signs or whatever it may be, unless the state is willing to help us. It's always been the questions that's come back. So how do we, we know we have to do it, but how do we do it?
Yeah, I think, that's a really interesting point is where do you see as the biggest obstruction? Because from what I've heard from everyone today is kind of full agreement that traffic needs to be slower on Route 6. It's just like one big idea. But besides kind of like the trickiness with state jurisdiction, are there kind of like a silent majority or a lot of other people who aren't maybe in this room today who would say, no, I want to just drive down Route 6 and I don't want any traffic calming or any of this type of stuff. So what
I've yet to meet anybody. I've yet to meet anybody that's happy with the speed on Route 6. It doesn't mean there's not someone there, but probably the residents of Mattapoisett would probably very vigorously argue to slow it down. And I think even the business people would be happy they could find a way to get people to go a little slower and not just zoom through our town.
All right, great. So the kind of next thing I wanted to pose as a question is, are there other streets in Mattapoisett that you think are also really, really dangerous for pedestrians, bikers, or even drivers that should be kind of really reevaluated?
Yeah, I'll go on this one. Ned's Point Road. So in Ned's Point Road, it's a beautiful road, but there's just so many people that walk, run, bike to Ned's Point, because Ned's Point is really a destination in Mattapoisett. So you got a lot of walkers and bikers. At the same time, you have a lot of vehicular traffic, and it's a very narrow road. And quite often, one lane is taken up by walkers or bikers, and traffic's forced to just take one lane, and that's fine for in most cases. People are pretty patient and don't mind waiting till they can get by, but it can be kind of hazardous again, just because Ned's Point is such a destination, and it's really, there's only one way to get in and get out, so it does become problematic.
Are there other similar roads or streets that anyone else can think of with this kind of condition or another issue?
Well, I think also North Street, north of Route 6, heading up toward 195, which once again is a problem for bicyclists and walkers. The cars are coming right off of 195. They really don't slow down. I mean, it's pretty fast moving.
Yeah, a lot of driving is kind of subconscious. So, if you're just flying off of the freeway, a lot of times you're still in a mode of thinking, I need to go fast.
Right, but it's a very narrow road. And as a cyclist, I can feel the side view mirrors get pretty close.
Yep.
What I would add is on North and all the streets we're talking about, if you have someone who's parked on the side of the road, parked in a legal parking spot, and you have two cars coming in opposite directions, one of those cars has to stop almost for the other car to be able to pass. And then you put bikers and or walkers, and you're really asking for a safety issue there. It really is depending on someone figuring out to stop first, let the other person get by. But it really isn't always a 2-lane road. Often it's a 1.5 lane road.
Sorry, is this a specific road or street, or is it
North Street? North Street, especially as it comes down to water and all the way up to really basically Route 6. And most of our streets have that issue, but that has the heaviest traffic. You come to the corner of North and Water. The way it's set up, you basically have parking almost to 1.5 cars length of that intersection. And, it's, I'm shocked that there are more accidents there. To get over, you have to go almost into the left lane, if you're in the right-hand lane, to get over close enough to the stop sign to see if anybody's coming across Water Street. So I think I can only imagine there's many people passing. There's a lot of issues there. Fortunately, most people drive slow, but it's an accident waiting to happen. I don't know if everybody agrees or disagrees, but I travel that almost every day a few times, and I find it amazing.
No, absolutely, I agree. A lot of times they're landscape trucks. People park. People don't have. They need off-street park, or they don't have off-street parking.
Right.
And you have walkers, bikers, and it often does become, particularly in the summer, where it gets down to one lane.
So this might sound like a counterintuitive idea, but some transportation planners and kind of thinking is actually that the little bit of chaos of the street, like parked vehicles, pedestrians, and like shared streets, is actually a way to calm traffic and force drivers to actually go slower. So some of these are kind of called Wunnerfs or something. It's like a Dutch concept, I think. Shared streets. So thinking kind of just a narrow alleyway, you don't necessarily need like a full sidewalk. Of course, one of the big challenges of these types of strategies is how do we make it accessible to persons with disabilities, especially whether they're blind or in a wheelchair, because sometimes it can be very tricky. But if there's a way to kind of more formalize it and make sure it's safe, kind of what is some of the appetite around those ideas for, sometimes these streets are really narrow and you can't really just take people's land and put a sidewalk there or expand the road.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that area, there is a sidewalk on the west side of North Street and the north side of Water Street.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
There is.
But if pedestrians are kind of walking in the road or something, that usually means the sidewalk's probably pretty narrow. Unfortunately, I don't have we have all the dimensions, but I don't have it right in front of me. In some ways, like if you've ever been to Provincetown, I'm not saying you're going to get this level of pedestrian traffic, but down Commercial Street, for example, it is a street where people drive down it. There are also bikers, but there are also lots of people. I think some people see it as kind of like too chaotic and like, why can't we separate all these modes out? But in many ways, there's actually not really a lot of accidents given how many people use it. So it's just kind of some kind of food for thought and ideas. Definitely not necessarily saying, yes, let's make everything a shared street, because that's not necessarily feasible everywhere.
And COVID hasn't helped the pedestrian issue either. Many people are trying to normally just pass each other. They're jumping into the street to let somebody else pass. That's part of it as well. I had a question, Philip, and I don't want to get too far afield from anybody here, but I was in Brooklyn about 3-4 weeks ago. And what amazed me, having not been there in about 4 years, was the amount of scooters, electric bikes, segways, the little platforms where people are going 30, 40 miles an hour down the street and interacting in the city pretty efficiently. Is that something that we can project would possibly come to Mattapoisett, or is that just a more of a urban phenomenon that is stuck there, or do we see ourselves someday having less cars and more types of transportation like this?
I think part of that was like in the urban areas, like lots of things like Bird, which was that startup that I don't know if it's still around. The electric scooter rentals really just kind of inundated a lot of these cities with those kinds of things, and have started to become kind of more ingrained. So I currently live in Boston. I kind of just started Serped, so I actually don't see it all too much. I see more bikers than like electric scooters, but it's definitely something we want to think about this is a plan. This is thinking way in the future. So
if Brooklyn was saturated with it, I would say probably 20% of the traffic was that, maybe 25% of the traffic on the streets of, basically Brooklyn Heights, Greenpoint, all that area. It amazed me. I'd never, almost like a hazard to be a driver. But I was just wondering if that kind of also tells a lot about transportation as well. And that is the coming mode of a new generation. It's not going to be for me, but it may be, part of our planning as well.
Right, definitely. I think it's something we should definitely consider. Even autonomous vehicles, I know there was a lot of promise for that, I would say like 5 years ago. And then now it's like, okay, this is not going to happen for quite a while. But always anticipating that, and also like the ideas of car shares, like zip cars, and kind of rethinking the way people get around. So we're definitely really open to these big ideas. I don't have any like numbers or projections of when this will happen. I kind of think of these things as like a tipping point. Like there's going to be a certain point they're like, holy cow, there's a lot of electric scooters and bicycles around. So how can we make our streets really inclusive to like existing modes of how we get around, but also these like future modes? So it's almost like future proofing it. So we could definitely look more into that.
About this kind of the same. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have 5 minutes left, just as a warning.
Okay, so kind of also in the spirit of the conversation on North Street at Water Street, one thing I often observe, this is on Main Street between Church Street and probably Pearl Street, which, if you keep zooming in just to the southeast of where your cursor is. Right down on Main Street though. So a lot of times, and this is an area where it does turn into a one-way road because of cars parked on the, I'll call it the north side of Main Street there. It gets really bad in there. And at the same time, people who are parking over there will sometimes park up on the sidewalk and prevent pedestrians or people with accessibility needs from even being able to utilize the sidewalk. I mean, I don't know if it's residents who live on the street or people who are trying to get to the wharf or what, but it seems like, that might be an area that would be prime for not having parking.
Definitely. And I think that's a common theme around this like village center area, that maybe there are a lot of areas that can reduce the amount of on-street parking if it's causing a lot of obstructions or issues. So that's definitely something we can flag.
And then another thought, I know a lot of municipalities and even projects that are LEED certified, they're including charging ports for EVs. It seems that maybe the town wharf area might be a good candidate for that, for having a charging station or two, or other areas where there's municipal parking, maybe even like the park and ride, although I'm guessing that's state-owned property, so that's kind of out of bounds for us. But
whereabouts would you say that point should go?
See on the LC Town Wharf, so I can't even say see the Town Wharf one. Go southeast, right down. That would be like the Harbor Masters building. So probably somewhere in that area. The parking, there'll be parking to the south of that that longer building that you just had the cursor on.
Mm-hmm.
So down in like that area. I mean, that's kind of getting into where things are going with vehicles. In the same respect, electric bikes are becoming more popular. I think I had read something that they're expected to, like in the next 10 years, they're going to quadruple or more in volume sold. So another, something that the town could even put into as a future transportation infrastructure is chargers for those sorts of things, or providing outlets for the riders to charge their bicycles. I mean, I think I've even seen that some manufacturers have these solar picnic areas that you can charge your bike's battery on while you're at it. And that may even be a good candidate towards like Ned's point as well.
Hey, Nathan, I was just thinking out loud, I might think out loud, I usually get myself in trouble, but we're talking about reducing parking, right? So obviously people want to park somewhere. What happens to the beach parking at night? Is it open to regular people like town parking? Could we be directing people to park there rather than taking away some of the parking spots, or would that be a negative thing?
I mean, as far as there's no gate on the parking at the town beach.
Yeah, I never think of parking there, but it's not that far of a walk to the bar, to the restaurants.
And I mean, there's that, and I mean, it may be that right now that the police may take notice if there are cars there. So that might be some sort of mindset that would have to be gotten over for having kind of a municipal parking area. But a lot of times, to be honest with you, when I drive down Main Street in that area, there are empty driveways throughout. So that's why I wonder if it's people who are at the wharf or if it is the residents who are parking on the street, because there are open spots in the driveways that are along there. I mean, I'm maybe 95% sure that each of those homes, at least through the Church Street and Pearl Street area, have a driveway.
No, I agree with you. I was just thinking, though, we could, if we have to take some spots away, possibly we could explore the idea of using the town parking after 6 o'clock or whatever it is as a suggestion to park. Because everybody seems to run to the wharf, to the down wharf area. That gets jammed up at parking. And, maybe that's a way of making everybody a little bit happy with the idea.
So I'm really sorry to do this, but I just want to mention that we're kind of at time for the breakout rooms, but before kind of the magic Zoom hand splits us all up, it was really awesome talking with all of you. We would love to keep hearing your thoughts through the transportation survey, which is, the link is on the kind of master plan website, and also in that presentation, which is also kind of on the website. I will post a link to that presentation here. And this is a link to the master plan website, where you can also get a link to the workshop page with all the kind of post workshop online surveys. So those will be open, I think, 1 to 2 weeks after this. So, all right. I guess everyone can keep talking until it just magically splits up. I just wanted to end on that.
Philip, are you going to add the note that we could possibly explore the town beach parking as a municipal lot at night? Okay. Good.
Yes, definitely. And I was going to add that, shared parking is something that we could even think about in a broader sense, because there's a lot of businesses, and does every business need their own parking lot if they're operating at different times? Like restaurants are busier at night versus like an insurance agency is only open, or a bank is only open during the day. Nothing's more frustrating than there's a bank parking lot that's like totally empty and you want to find a spot for like
yes, you live in Boston, you know exactly what I know what you're talking about.
All right, bye guys.
We can get started. I apologize. Thank you for your patience. So I think we can get started with open space and recreation. I'm just gonna introduce the topic and actually switch my screen so we're on the right one. But as you might know, my name is Lizette. I'm joined today by Robert, who will be kind of leading our discussion here. So Robert, take it away.
Thanks, Lizette. So from the big room, you might remember we went over some open space maps and an exercise. So we're now going to do a quick run through that open space exercise. So if you'll all take the exercise with us, I think we can have some fun and do it together. It involves 2 questions here on the first page that maybe we can all just answer together. So when you picture open spaces for future generations, what do you imagine most? Coastlines, wetlands, and beaches that protect us from sea level rise and storms, natural spaces that support wildlife and human communities, or parks, trails, and playgrounds filled with healthy kids. So anybody can answer this.
I know they're all very appealing, and if we could, we would choose all of them. But is there one that kind of?
I choose all three.
To me, they overlap.
We've heard that too. Yeah, yeah. So is there one that really strikes you as like if you had to choose one? So the reason I say this is because these kind of questions will generate the combination of the maps that we showed you before. So depending on what your answer is, you'll get like a map that shows purely climate resilience. So what areas in town we would need to really focus on in order to increase our resiliency to climate impacts. Or there might be one where it's like a balance of climate and recreation. And in that way, we'll focus on areas in town that are, we need to increase resiliency, but also contribute to recreation, amenities and activities and that kind of culture in town. So just to give you an idea, and that'll become a little bit more clear as we kind of play through the exercise.
Yeah, and we can see the other maps after we choose any of these, but we just want to walk through sort of mechanisms of the exercise too.
Can we take a vote or?
We can. So I should let you know. You can take this survey as many times as you like. You can go through the results, but just for the purposes of illustrating how it works, is there anyone that like you can shout out whatever answer?
Oh, the first one. I would say the first one.
The first.
Yeah, because this is a crisis.
Yeah,
we're in. Yeah.
And I should, part of doing this, we just want to walk through the exercise so everyone feels comfortable answering it, and we'll all have an opportunity to pick, our own two answers for when we take it individually.
Let's do it.
So the second question, how would you prioritize? Number one. So we're done. So
all right. So let's see what the result is.
Wait, no. The result of one?
Go back one moment. Go back. Can we go back one moment?
Please.
If we picked number one for question one and number one for question two, is that where we're at?
But we didn't pick number one for question two.
Right, correct.
So
it's just illustrative. You can pick your responses for when you take the survey. This is just to show how.
This is just an example. I got it. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
We are actually taking it together, but you'll have an opportunity.
Okay.
So based on how we answered those questions, we got a climate resilience focused map. So Robert, the layers back and front, so you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so we can see, the green areas in the map will change depending on the answers we pick. So we can see a lot of green along the coastline, for example, in the scenario, because we picked a climate resilience focused map. Mm-hmm. And just as, again, going through the exercise, if we see down at the bottom, question 3, you may see some things you agree with or disagree with on this map. And you have an opportunity when we take this quiz individually to fill out, your thoughts on what you think about the map. What would you add or do differently?
What's the computer list?
Do you mind going to the next page really quick, Lizette?
Sure.
And I could see maybe some of the gears turning with folks while we were doing that first exercise. What happens if we pick this? What happens if we pick, this other answer? Here's the 6 possible options for, answering the questions differently. So without having to take the quiz several times, we can pick the maps that are possible answers based off those 2 questions. So Lizette has selected a couple here, and then we hit next. And it provides us an opportunity to see those 2 answers that we selected and provide feedback on those as well. So we see here the recreation focus, which again has land, in dark green close to community assets like schools and the YMCA. And
could you possibly zoom that up just a little bit so we could see it a little bit more?
I can try to bring my
That's
screen
great.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much better. Cool.
Yeah, as well as some recreation land, down by Mattapoisett Neck and east there. So you can see sort of how the inputs generate where the darker green areas are. And we selected another one. I think it was a hybrid focus. I just looked at our climate resilience and natural resources focus here. Again, so it's sort of a hybrid between these 2 maps. It draws from factors that contribute to both.
Yeah.
And if we just scroll really quickly to the bottom. So in here, we know we're not going to capture everything with these maps. We really think of them as a way to start the conversation around prioritizing open space use. And I think this is a good segue to, an opportunity for you guys to really tell us specific things that are important in Mattapoisett for the open space. So when we all take the quiz individually, we can provide these answers here. But similarly, we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on, specific areas that are meaningful to you for these kinds of categories and how you think of prioritizing them in Mattapoisett.
It's just a process question. To get to this, is this the survey that takes us to these maps, or is the mapping exercise embedded in the surveys, or are they two separate things?
Two separate things. So this is the survey right now, and you can answer that. That's in the presentation as well, so it'll prompt you where you can find it. And this here is the mapping exercise. And this is something that you can use to kind of like pinpoint, and just kind of basing off that question, that's the question number 7 on the survey, like what areas are there any parts of Mattapoisett that you really value or that have maintenance issues? And this is a great place to pinpoint that as well.
I have a question. Are you distinguishing public versus privately owned areas? Because it seems like some of the areas that are highlighted as recreation are private beaches.
Well, that's a whole other issue. Well, that's a whole nother topic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you talking about in the scenario maps that we were just looking at a moment ago?
Yes.
I think it is possible that some of the land that shows up in dark green could be privately owned beaches, because that land would be in layers such as land that's vulnerable to flooding. That doesn't necessarily distinguish between whether it's private or public. But when we look at protected areas and things like that, those layers would be limited to public land.
But back to your point, that's a conversation that's come up not only at this workshop. I believe we've heard it before. And if it's not already in some of the points there, I think it should be. I know that people have talked about kind of opening up these potential recreation areas to the public on the argument that it might be a public good. Is that something that people agree with or don't?
That's a big question because it applies to the coastline in the entire state, and in terms of the extent of privately owned coastline. And in Mattapoisett, it's a good example. We have very little public access to the coastline.
And to that point, I'm sorry, I'll make a point afterwards.
Oh, I just wanted to say, is that something that you'd like to see change? And do you see how
I don't think it's realistic because the cost to Massachusetts is prohibitive.
Okay.
I mean, that's been looked at for years, and the resolute, and there have been lawsuits trying. I know Falmouth had a test case, and I don't remember exactly the facts of the case, but the end result is that the cost to make these areas public, even to currently the public has the right between mean high and mean low to fish and do a couple of other not even walk. And
you have the right to fish or fowl.
Fowl, right.
And fowl is open to interpretation.
So just changing it to allow people to walk in that area has generated a lot of controversy. I just don't see in the scheme of our priorities that we're going to see anything happen to change the law on privately owned coastline.
I absolutely agree with Janice, and I think therefore what we need to focus on are the few and special places that we do have where there is public access, and make sure that those areas are easily accessible in many different ways. Even, for example, with parking within spots where you can see the beach. If you're in a position where you can drive but you can't get out of your car, at Town Beach you can drive and park there. On the public wharf you can drive and park there. At Town Landing, is that the one off Mattapoisett Neck Road? You can drive and park there. And I'm not as familiar with Hollywood. I know that's a public beach.
Ned's Point.
And Ned's Point,
Ned's Point,
absolutely,
another
with
one,
the
yeah.
capital, I mean, I would put that number one.
Right.
The parking there has been a problem, so.
That's true.
Well, it's very busy, particularly in season. When the, we live just east of there. And we walk there a lot with the dog, and off season, there's plenty of parking, but in season, people are parked on the streets and
Well, I'm not sure who actually owns that, but it's not, the facility is not managed by the town. In other places, you must have a town parking pass to park. For example, at Town Beach or on the wharf.
Yeah, I don't
But
think.
not at Ned's Point.
Is that true at Town Landing as well?
Yes.
Okay.
The town doesn't really have the capacity to monitor the parking stuff. You know, I think what would be valuable is to improve the roads around Ned's Point and to improve parking at different places. I would even say we need to ensure that the recreational areas that we do have are well maintained.
Here, here.
Be that the pickleball courts and the tennis courts down at Center School, or again, go back to what's the plan for the Holy Ghost grounds that, you know, were supposed to be purchased for recreational purposes. So there's, in my opinion, a real value to maintaining not just the harbor and the area around Water Street, but also moving out to other parts of the town.
Also, to get back to Ned's Point, I grew up in New Bedford. And I think it's, you know, I mean, we would drive on Sunday into Mattapoisett and go down to Ned's Point and spend an hour. I would hate to see this town get so exclusive that.
Oh, I don't think we should.
No, well, I'm talking about, you know, like a town sticker to be able to park your car at Ned's Point, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not, I don't think that's, you know, I would hate to see Mattapoisett go in that direction.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying cause and effect, that's all.
Right.
Is there like so my understanding is that's how it is currently, right? You need a resident pass to park in any of those areas?
No.
Except for Ned's Point.
No. Except for Ned's Point. Okay, okay. And would there be, you think, pushback if, say, the town said on certain days of the week, it would be more open to the public?
What, Ned's Point?
The other places that require.
There's hardly anybody there on weekends from October to April.
I see. Okay.
And then it, you know, and then when the weather gets, the weather gets nice, it's, you know, people.
It's a good endpoint to be able to bicycle to walk to, you know, drive down and see the water, particularly if you're limited in your mobility. So I think it's just incumbent upon us as a town to keep that area nice and accessible.
Sure. Yeah.
Keep the bathrooms clean and all the rest of it.
The town recently did some new parking restrictions. They're prohibiting parking on one side of the road and only allowed to park on the other side. But I don't know, that's over with now that the Labor Day has gone by.
I thought that was great in that it was observed that it was a problem and there was an assessment made and a change made, and it all seemed to happen quite expeditiously. It was excellent.
It's pretty unusual.
Oh, where did that happen? Where was that?
On Ned's Point Road.
Where the lighthouse is.
From the lighthouse,
okay.
No, from Marion Road down Ned's Point Road to the lighthouse.
It's a rather narrow road, and it's extremely popular for walking and or walking dogs.
And biking.
Right. And also just driving down to see the lighthouse. So it's extremely busy.
And in the summer, you've got the you know, the harbor, the
windsurfers.
Not just that, but I'm talking about, well, I standing at the place, the Mattapoisett boatyard.
The boatyard.
I mean,
yeah, which is
there's always cars coming in and out all summer long during the day. So it is really busy. I mean, they did banish dogs a few years ago, which was too bad, but
at the park.
at the park, right?
But you
right.
still see people walking up and down the road with their
Oh,
dogs.
you do? Oh, yes, yes. I just think it's a nice, it's a nice community place. Like we rode our bikes into Fairhaven the other day, and we went to Fort Phoenix, which was great. There were lots of different people there, and lots of people who don't come from Fairhaven.
Yeah.
And I sort of see Ned's point as a similar kind of place.
Well, and to Lizette's point about the beaches that, or the waterfronts that are accessible only with the town parking pass. I think, and perhaps, opening that up on certain days or whatever, I would say that right now, the way it works is in the middle of the summer when the days are long and it's hot. I don't know what time the parking pass goes till and they stop checking. I want to say 5 o'clock, maybe.
Mm.
And when I tend to go at that hour just because it's quieter, but there's a lot of people there from out of town kind of after hours. The tide is high, it's 92 degrees in the shade, and there's a whole lot of people there who I think have come from further afield and are enjoying the beach. So I mean, I think that's great.
There's parking available on the street.
Yes.
On the side streets. So it's not like people from out of town can't get parking.
Right, exactly.
It's not convenient. Plus it doesn't get to 92 in Mattapoisett, right?
No, you're right. Oh, I don't know. I think one day I was there. It was pretty hot, even in the shade.
And I had to leave the discussion for a few minutes when you all talking about beach access. We live right on the water here, sometimes very close to it, the storm. We have been here for 25 years, and we've never had a problem with somebody walking across from Pico Beach, and they can get here at low tide, or coming down Prospect Road, etc. But I have been questioned at times walking across other private beaches in town. Not stopping, not doing anything, just, walking. Where do you live? Do you live here? That kind of stuff. I don't know what can be done about that, except, making people more friendly, or giving them an opportunity to be more friendly to people walking across the beach. But it does seem to be, there aren't many private beach areas. I don't know about the Neck and Brant Island, but down here in Crescent Beach and Pico Beach, etc., it's, you practically need to show your vaccination card to be able to keep going.
Well, as Janice mentioned earlier, the law is that the beach owner owns the beach, but that other people have the right to walk between high tide and low tide, mean high tide and mean low tide, so long as they are either fishing or fouling. Just walking, and so, I carry my binoculars with me. I'm not quite sure what fouling means, but I think intentionally, originally it was for shooting birds, but
not shooting, no, watching.
Right, but technically, just walking is not allowed.
Well, there is a bill being introduced by the state senator and the state rep from the Cape to add the word recreation to fishing, fouling, and whatever that third thing is, because of just this issue that access to private beaches through walking is not possible. So they want to open
the likelihood of that passing is really, really remote.
Yeah, it's too hard to change everybody's land.
There'll be lawsuits all over the place by property owners. I just don't see it happening.
Just to connect what we're talking about now with what we were just talking about, which was Ned's point, there are 4 big signs between going east from the lighthouse towards Pico Beach, towards where we live, that say, please take notice, private beach, do not trespass. I mean, these are big signs, big signs. They're not really in accordance with the law. They don't say you can do this, this, and this, but they're there every summer.
Yeah.
Well, the private property owners have a right to protect their property.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know who they're protecting it from, but the fact is that it's inconsistent with what we were just talking about the law, which is if you want to carry a fishing pole or you've got binoculars, then you have a right to cross, to keep walking across that, across that stretch of beach. And I'm not picking on them. It just happens to be there, the next beach over from us. That's the reason why. And I walk Crescent Beach all the time. We don't live at Crescent Beach. We're in the Cedars, but no one ever says anything to me. Even if I sat down, no one says anything to me. So maybe just a general discussion about friendliness and consistency. That's really what it comes down to. Because you may not pass, you're right, Janice, but there's gonna be a lot of discussion about it, I think, in the next year.
It happens every few years.
It does happen, and we've seen it happen before.
So, but I think as part of our master plan, though, and we have to prioritize, I would like to focus on things that we can realistically accomplish rather than, things that are, so iffy to happen that we can't do everything, right? We have to prioritize things. So I guess I would focus, as somebody already said, on the existing public access that we have in town and what we do with those.
Well, a minor point, but certainly at Town Beach, we could do with a nice repaving of the parking lot, but not highest on the priority list. But again, that's what great beach access that we have, and it would be nice to have it a little bit less scary to drive on.
I think that's a great comment. Honestly, this came up in the last discussion group that we had, where we're talking about these grand ideas of like, what do you love? What are the challenges? But it's these little, very specific kind of morsels of information and improvements that really let us say, okay, this is what people want to see. So if repaving the lot is going to improve access, that's a big deal.
I think also we've seen positively the other incredible access that we have is, I think it's amazing that we've got, I don't know, what do we have, 3 piers that you can drive down on, and there's a lot of parking spaces on them, and you can be on top of the water sitting there in your car. And I know that the Lieutenant Governor was here a couple of weeks ago on the project to continue to improve and invest capital investment in maintaining those piers, because they're not in the best of shape. And I think that's another critical asset that we have. I mean, that's the foundation, literally, of Mattapoisett, is the shipbuilding, and those piers were the heart of that activity. And it's a great access point for us today in terms of being able to go and sit and look at the water, be on top of the water, watch all the boating activity. It's great. And so I know there's work in progress to work on those. And I think that's important to always continue to focus on that and do that.
Where are those located, Mary?
At Town Wharf.
Right.
Okay.
This is Town Wharf. There's 3 piers there. You can see them sticking out, and they're concerned right now because the foundations of the piers are not doing well, and they are going to, I don't know exactly, replace them or reinforce them or whatever they're going to do to maintain them.
Right.
And on top of them is parking lot. On top of them are parking.
Right. In terms of the parking area, when you mentioned the poor condition of the parking area next to the beach, I was thinking of the Town Beach. I was thinking of Town Landing. The town has done a nice job in upgrading the Town Landing access, and they didn't do it with any paving either. It's gravel and dirt, and a nice park area.
I think that's an underutilized asset that people don't realize is there.
We want to be environmentally good about any changes, and paving always strikes me as not being a good solution, but there are other ways to improve that parking area next to the beach.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be paving, but make it, improve it. Mentioning Town Landing, I think actually that it might be interesting to somehow get that more into the public view. Everybody knows Town Beach because everybody goes down Water Street and sees it. But Town Landing is a really nice asset as well. And I know all the people in Mattapoisett Neck are familiar with it, but it's a shame that I think more whenever I'm there, and it's the last times it's off season, but that people don't seem to be there. It's kind of sad.
There's a lot of people keep canoes and kayaks there all summer.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be particularly important for people to know about Town Landing, because we don't want people parking on Mattapoisett Neck Road to access the bike path once it's extended.
That's what I've done when I've used the bike path is I park at Town Landing and then just, keep my fingers crossed as people speed by me on Mattapoisett Neck Road.
Right.
We did another area of concern in terms of speed.
We did that 2 days ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to interrupt or end the conversation prematurely. I know we're going to be wrapping up and rejoining the rest of the group in a minute or two. But I think, this is a great conversation starter. Like I said, this is just one way to interact with the workshop. And before we go, I just want to make sure I get this right. Mary, you said that it seems like only a few people tend to visit Town Landing.
I would put it more on a positive. So more people might visit Town Landing if they were more aware of its existence and amenities.
Okay, that's great. And I think
parking with a view, boating access, kayak and canoe access, and bike path access. You can park there and not ride too far, and you're on the bike path.
Right. And that's what we want to encourage people to do, because Depot Street is more for people who are parking their trailers for the boat.
Yes.
And
there's no swimming at Town Landing.
No swimming.
No swimming. There's no swimming.
No swimming.
And you can park, you can access.
Park, you have a great view. You can put a boat in.
That's great. We've heard comments about increasing just awareness of these spaces too. So I think we're going to be transitioning back to the main room. And I want to thank everyone for their comments. Please keep them coming, either through the surveys or the mapping exercise. So I appreciate your thoughts. And if you want to share some main takeaways in the main group, please do so.
Thanks, Lizette.
Thank you.
Where do we get the link to the survey?
I will send that out before we close the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So weird not to go to meetings and see people, real people. Oh. Oh.
Hi everyone. So now that we're back in the main session, I want to welcome everyone back and thank you for all your comments in the breakout sessions. Before we leave tonight, I want to take a few minutes just to kind of wrap up and get a sense for what the major takeaways were. Was there anything that really stood out to you in the comments that were mentioned tonight about transportation or open space and recreation? Oh, I think you're muted, Bev. There we go.
I was going to add that, Route 6 came up again, as it always does. And, seeing a solution isn't going to be easy, but I think it has to be sought.
For sure.
I also think we need to make sure that as we're planning recreational areas in the future, we also need to plan how to get to those recreational areas, not just by car, but by bicycle or walking. So again, I want to stress the right of way in the old railroad bed as an area of consideration. If that's not going to happen, we need to make the roads bike and walking friendly to join the two ends of the bike path.
Great comment. Yeah, thank you. We heard a lot about that, how to improve access, how to continue maintaining and improving our existing recreation sites. It's always great to think about the future. Does anyone else have any comments before we close out the meeting?
This is Mary Darmiti. I was just going to make a suggestion. Lizette, I think you mentioned that you're going to send us all or provide access link to the surveys. And I made a note to myself that I know a number of people who have expressed interest to me about this process. They're not joining in tonight, but that I'm going to email and send the links on to and say, you know, if you want to provide input, here's your opportunity. And if you'd like to do that, you know, do it now.
So I'm sharing a link to the presentation. Please let me know if that doesn't work. But that presentation has the links to all the surveys, the mapping exercises, and I'll be posting that on the workshop webpage as well. So if you can share it to your friends, your family members, your neighbors, that would really go a long way in just getting more input on what we want in regards to transportation, open space and recreation, and really anything about the master plan. We'll take just about any comments you have. I know there are a lot of hot topics when it comes to transportation. We're talking about Route 6, we're talking about the bike path, and that intersects so neatly when it comes to recreation, all the opportunities that there are in town. So with that, I've shared the presentation. I'll post the recording on the website over the next few days just to clean it up a little bit. But any last comments before we close? I don't see any hands up. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight. We appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to be here. Thank you to our staff for doing such a great job and organizing this and putting it all together. So thank you. And with that, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Robert.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.